The movie begins with a scene featuring a ballerina named Dominika Igorova, who is calmly unwinding while listening to a peaceful song through her headphones. Simultaneously, a CIA agent, Nate Nash, is sitting down nervously. When the phone rings, he rushes to answer. The caller calls out some secret code to him, and he quickly writes it down. After deciphering the code, Nate discovers a meeting location called Gokipak over at Dominika's house. She gets up, takes care of her ailing mother, and takes her to the hospital for her medical checkup. Upon returning home, Dominika hands over her mother to her caregiver, Leni, before making her way to work. She arrives at work, puts on her makeup, and gets ready to perform. Before going on stage, her uncle, Vanya, who is also the deputy director of the SVR and a Russian intelligence agency employee, introduces her to a wealthy man, Dmitry Astonov. Dmitry immediately takes an interest in Dominika and insists on taking a picture with her. Moments later, she gets on stage and gives a powerful performance, which the crowd enjoys. Meanwhile, Nate meets up with an unknown person to exchange a mysterious object and go their separate ways. However, a police car shows up in the corner and tries to stop the unknown person, but Nate brings out his gun to cause a distraction, which then allows the unknown person to escape. The police redirect their attention to Nate, and a pursuit begins through the streets of Moscow. Nate manages to evade the dozens of police officers chasing him and makes it to the American embassy, where he immediately seeks refuge. Back at the theater where she is playing, her co-dancer accidentally steps on her legs during the play, resulting in breaking her leg, which brings the play to an abrupt end. She is taken to the hospital to receive medical care afterward. Now in the embassy, Nate's superiors scold him for being reckless. They said the cops that he encountered while he was with his asset were just looking for the usual crooks and weren't tailing him, but he has officially lost his cover because of the little stunt he pulled. Nate defends himself and says he was only trying to make sure his asset was not discovered, as that would let the Russians know that they have a mole amongst them. In the next scene, Vanya meets up with the director of the agency, Zakharov, and a high-ranking general, Kirchner. The duo informs him about the latest event about Nate and the mystery behind the unknown person he met. Shortly after, she wakes up in her hospital bed and is in tears after realizing she will never be able to dance again. 3 months later, Dominika is recovering from her accident, and Vanya visits her. Vanya tells her that she will be losing her benefits, including the medical bills of her mother and the apartment she stays in, because she is no longer working for the dance company. Before leaving, Vanya gives her a puzzle that has a tape recorder. She listens to the audio and realizes that her partner intentionally stepped on her leg during the dance in order to get his girlfriend to replace Dominika as his dancer. Hearing this, she gets angry and makes her way to the company, where she silently stalks her former partner and his girlfriend. She follows them into the bathroom and surprises them while they are making out, and beats them to a pulp with her walking stick. Moments later, she feels remorseful and calls the hospital to report the incident, which in turn saves the duo from dying. She gets home to find her mother laying on the floor because the caregiver had left her there since the company stopped paying them. This saddens her, who decides to go and see her uncle. The next day, she meets up with her uncle, who informs her of the details of what she has to do if she doesn't want to lose her apartment and the medical care of her mother. Vanya tells Dominika to meet up with Dmitry in a hotel and make him drop his guard. She agrees and goes to the hotel. Dmitry soon approaches her, and the duo have a heart-to-heart conversation. After the conversation, she takes Dmitry to her room and tells him to get rid of his bodyguards. After the departure of the guards, Dmitry stops forcing himself on her, but a masked man soon appears from behind and terminates Dmitry. The masked man asks Dominika to follow him, and the duo escapes from the hotel together on a motorcycle. When they get to their destination, the masked man takes off his helmet and is revealed to be a Russian intelligence operative, Matorin. Vanya informs Dominika that she's now a witness to Dmitry Ustanov's death. He says she has two choices, one of which is to be killed for the state to be sure of her discretion, or to join a school where Russia trains some of their best minds in the act of manipulation and deceit. Dominika is pushed into a corner and has no choice but to pick the latter. After saying farewell to her mother, she is transported to the training school, where the graduates are called sparrows. However, her mother warns her about Vanya and says he cannot be trusted because he has always looked at her romantically since she was a child. Arriving at the school, a woman who identifies herself as the matron welcomes Dominika. She gives Dominika a note that contains the alias she will use during her stay at the school. Matron doesn't hide her feelings and lets Dominika know that she sees her as someone who would not be able to cope because she has had no military training in the past. Shortly afterwards, Dominika starts her training with other cadets. In the United States, Nate is informed of his indefinite suspension, but Nate tells his superiors that his asset will never agree to work with someone else except him. Days later, Nate realizes the Russians are following, which means they don't know who his asset is yet. He informs his superiors about this, and they decide to deploy him to Hungary in an attempt to make contact with his asset again. Back in Russia, Dominika is performing excellently among her peers. While she is taking a shower, one of the male cadets enters and tries to force himself on her, but she takes off the shawl controller and uses it to defend herself. Soon afterward, General Korchnoi visits the academy and realizes that Dominika will be of good use to the agency. She returns to Moscow and meets up with her uncle. He tells her about her new mission. She explains that she is to get close to Nate, win his trust, and try to find out the name of the mole. She is given a passport and new credentials for her to use during her stay. Finally, she arrives in Budapest and goes straight to the apartment that has been prepared for her. She meets her roommate, Marta, who is also another sparrow. The next day, she meets up with the station chief, Volantov. Volantov appears to be a man who loves women, as he tries to get his way with Dominika, but she doesn't give him any space. She starts preparing to get close to Nate, and Marta tells her that Russia will never let her go unless she finds something on them. Soon afterward, she registers at the pool where Nate usually goes. Nate sees her and confronts her outside the pool. He has a short conversation with her and invites her to dinner, but Dominika refuses. However, Nate quickly discovers that she is a Russian operative, but he isn't sure if she's from the intelligence department. Nate also finds out that Vanya is her uncle. His superiors tell him to try and get close to her, but not too close, and Nate agrees. Later, she meets up with Nate. The duo have a conversation, and she doesn't hide the fact that she's a spy. She tells Nate how she ended up where she is. After their date, they set another for tomorrow. Later that night, Dominika searches Nate's room. She discovers that Marta is profiling the chief of staff. Up next, Dominika trails Volantov to a bar, where she confronts him about the negative report he sent to Moscow because of her unwillingness to make out with him. She triggers Volantov and tricks him into punching her in the face. She then uses the situation to blackmail him and says she will charge him for assault unless he writes a favorable report, which he then agrees to. The next day, Nate is waiting at a restaurant, but soon leaves when Dominika refuses to show up. However, she is at a distance, and she uses the opportunity to follow Nate to his apartment. While in his apartment, Nate receives a call from his asset and puts down a secret code, which translates to the enter. Moments later, Dominika rings Nate, and he lets her in. She tries to make out with Nate, but he declines. The following morning, she breaks into Nate's house when he's not around and steals a drinking cup from his table. She gets home to meet her uncle, who is waiting for her. Vanya says Dominika's progress is not great. To push away from the subject, she quickly uses Nate's profiling asset as a shield. She says she's working with Marta to make the United States Chief of Staff join them, and this puts Vanya at ease. After Vanya's departure, Marta confronts Dominika about her plan to get credit for what she's been working on. However, she says she only used that to get more time and isn't interested in taking Nate's credit. Marta insists, and Dominika tells her what the state has on her. She tells Marta that she witnessed Dmitry Ustinov's murder. Soon afterward, Dominika visits Vienna to open a bank account in Vanya's name. Meanwhile, Marta goes to Volantov to tell him how they can both get rid of Dominika. Later that day, Dominika arrives home to find Nate's dead body in the tub. Maturin comes from behind and says this is the last warning she will get. If she ever tells her secret to anyone again, she will be the one to die. On the other hand, Nate's asset has given him information that Dominika is a sparrow. Nate soon receives words about what happened to her roommate and goes outside the police station to pick her up. Getting to Nate's house, she confides in him and tells him everything that happened. Nate says Russia will never let her go, and he suggests that she start working for the United States. After assuring her that she can trust him, the duo makes out on the couch. The next morning, Nate tells Dominika everything she has to do to make the SVR believe she's making progress. Later on, she takes a truth test with the CIA, which she passes. She then tells the CIA that a chief of staff with the name Boucher is willing to sell United States nuclear launch codes to Russia, and she will be meeting with her in London. Up next, she gets to the hotel where she's to meet Boucher, but realizes Balantov is also there. Dominika asks Balantov to go to her room and wait for her. Meanwhile, the CIA watches everything that is going on through their spy cameras. Boucher arrives and follows Dominika to her room, where they exchange the discs containing the codes for $250,000. She enters the other room to verify the codes, but uses that opportunity to switch out the discs with the fake ones that have already been planted by the CIA. After the deal is concluded, Dominika and Balantov leave and ask Boucher to wait an hour before leaving. However, Boucher leaves the hotel room immediately, but soon finds out that she's being followed. She panics and gets knocked down by a truck. Meanwhile, Nate goes to the hotel room to retrieve the original discs. The Russian agents around the hotel notice Boucher's accident and immediately call Balantov to tell him that someone has betrayed Boucher. Balantov and Dominika are immediately summoned back to Russia. Nate runs after Dominika to try and rescue her, but she waves him off at the airport. Upon their arrival in Russia, Balantov and Dominika are questioned, tortured, and beaten to confess who exposed Boucher to the Americans. After a series of questions, Balantov is killed, but Dominika is perceived to be innocent. She then begs Vanya to send her back to Nate because, by doing this, the Americans would have more trust in her. Vanya agrees, and she is released. Before embarking on her mission, she visits Vanya in his home and says she's now certain that they are very much alike. In America, Nate is surprised to see her. They both head to his apartment and make out before sleeping. She wakes up in the middle of the night and finds Matoran torturing Nate. She immediately joins him and helps in beating Nate so that he will say the name of the mole, but Nate refuses. Matoran lets his guard down, and Dominika uses the opportunity to attack him and cut Nate loose. She and Nate get stabbed and cut in the ensuing fight, but she eventually gets the upper hand and kills Matoran. She then calls the American embassy for help. In the next scene, she wakes up in a hospital and is met by General Korchnoi. She tries to explain her situation to him, but soon finds out that Korchnoi is the mole they have been looking for. Korchnoi explains that he was initially faithful to Russia, but became angry at Russia's corruption when a bureaucrat he had once offended refused to allow an American doctor to operate on his sick wife. Korchnoi says Dominika is free to give him up, but she should continue his work with the Americans. After Korchnoi's departure, she surrenders herself to Hungary's authority, but demands to speak with Chief Zakharov. During a phone call with the chief, she tells Zakharov the name of the mole. Before going to bed, Korchnoi leaves his door open, enjoys a glass of wine, and puffs a big cigar. Later on, Dominika is taken to an airport, where the Russians have agreed to exchange her for the mole. When the time comes to reveal the mole's identity, Nate is surprised to see Vanya. It turns out that Dominika has framed Vanya with evidence she has fabricated over time by pinning him as the American mole. Just as the exchange happens, a sniper shot comes from a distance and kills Vanya, but the Russians escape with Dominika. In the ending scenes of the movie, Dominika is honored in a military ceremony that has Korchnoi in attendance. Later on, she is seen living happily with her mother. She receives a call from an unknown person who plays a piano concert song. She deduces that the caller is no other person but Nate. She smiles as she listens to the song. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like. It really helps the channel.